The first thing I'll do is call the special open council meeting to order. No, sorry, special closed council meeting to order, and now I'll recess it until after the other meetings have been done, have been accomplished. And the first item then is the special council meeting. This is the one, the appeal of the tree removal permit refusal for 3260 Williams Road. So we'll ask staff, is there anything to add to the report or to clarify?
Your Worship, I'd like to offer a very brief summary as a presentation.
All right.
Okay. The tree requested for removal is one of 4 surviving conifers in the rear yard of Mr. Santos' property. In September 2018, staff attended the property after being alerted by neighbors to overtrimming of 4 trees and the unauthorized removal of 1. Since that over-aggressive trimming, the 4 trees, including the subject western red cedar, has made rigorous recovery, regaining substantial canopy growth, and may not be removed under the criteria used in our tree protection bylaw. That's the conclusion of my summary.
All right. Anybody have any questions of staff? Okay, I'm not seeing anybody. So that will now go to the appellant. I understand you're Mr. Neri Santos, and you're the appellant? Okay, if you could come down here, have a seat. You can leave your mask on or take it off as you wish. And tell us about the situation from your point of view, why the tree removal permit has been refused and you're appealing, saying it should be granted.
First of all, I would like to thank Your Worship, Mr. Brody, and the rest of the councillors who have been very kind to attend this meeting, and the city staff who has responded to several of my emails on a timely basis. The reason of my appeal is I have mentioned it in my addendum, which is based on the following: my request to the council to grant permission for the removal of 1 tree, tag number 611. Well, it is evident that the refusal of the tree should have been granted based on the fact that when we had initially submitted the application for removal of the 6 trees, which were all in the same line, 1 tree, tag number 613 was allowed, and 609, 610, 611, 612, 614, and 615 were removed. Now, the over-trimming of this tree was not done when I was present when the landscaper did it. I only asked him to trim 1 tree, and he only trimmed 1 tree. The fact that was mentioned that the 5 trees were trimmed is incorrect. When city staff came to the site when I had initially applied in 2017, I was given to understand verbally that I was allowed to trim the tree up to 25 feet. And the tree was trimmed in 2015. In 2018, when the 4 trees were not trimmed, except 611, and 1 tree was removed without my authorization. I was not present when the tree was trimmed, was cut, and 1 tree, yes, I do admit the tree was trimmed. I was requested by the city staff to get an independent arborist report in October of 2018, which I submitted. When the meeting was held with Mr. Gordon Jaggs and his associate, I was told that if the arborist report mentioned that the tree could be removed or should be removed, it would be removed. I submitted the report in October 2018 to the city staff, showing that the tree has been excessively trimmed and it doesn't have the strength to retain itself. Based on the fact that all the trees are on the same line, I feel that the tree should be removed. Moreover, the drain tile is in the same proximity of the trees. I got an independent engineer to submit a letter which I have attached from Bansal and Associates, who was not the engineer on this project. He came, he looked at it, and the letter clearly indicates that the trees could have a potential hazard to the drain tile issue. Now, the sanitary sewer is about 3 to 6 feet away from tag number 611. This could potentially have an effect on the drain tile issue. Moreover, tag number 616, which is closest to the garden shed, is only 3 feet away, and the tree has not been cut, and that could affect the foundation of the house. There have been cases where the branches of the tree have fallen due to the high winds, as the property is very close to the dike. Many times I have found that the branches have fallen down and it has fallen in the neighbor's compound, and the neighbor requested me to please trim the tree or cut the tree down. I said, I cannot do anything until I get permission from the city. Moreover, I have noticed around the Springmont area and Williams Road, same issues, the trees have been removed, which is close to the sanitary sewer. I find it rather ironic that my application has been rejected.
Now, the staff report talks about the cedar tree, the roots are 20 feet from the house foundation and the perimeter drainage.
Yeah, but the sanitary sewer, the drain tile, what we call, is only about 5 feet away from tag number 611. And tag number 609, it's even closer. So the sanitary sewer is the main cause that could have a huge impact. Yes, it does affect it, but if you see Mr. Bansal's letter, it does not, he clearly indicates that even if it says here, concrete driveways and drain tiles should be placed within the tree roots influence and zone. We have seen that the tree roots damaging shallow foundations, driveways, and drain tiles.
All right, sir, I'm not seeing anybody asking any questions, so thank you. We will excuse you. Thank you. No, thank you. I've got a question from Councillor Day. Is that for the delegation or for staff?
For staff.
Okay, go ahead.
Thank you very much, Mr. Cooper. So if the tree in question, tag number 611, does damage the sanitary sewer drain, who's responsible, the owner or the city?
Through your worship to Councillor Day, the sanitary sewer is at a depth of 3 meters. That's over 10 feet underground. The sanitary sewer is not a drain tile composition. The sanitary sewer is a solid pipe and roots do not get into it. A conifer, a basic structure of coniferous trees is that roots are in a mat system. The average depth or the maximum depth in this case is 18 inches. So because of the differential between the depth of the roots, the construction of the city's sanitary sewer, and the differentiation between their different soil depths, we find it highly unlikely that there should be a damage to the city sewer main.
Okay, just a follow-up question then. So maybe there's some confusion of the difference between the sanitary sewer and the Big O pipe, which I'm sorry, I don't remember which page Mr. Santos had it on, but he was concerned about the Big O pipe. And so, but those are not sanitary sewers. Those are strictly for drainage from the gutters. Am I wrong?
Through your worship to Councillor Day, I believe Mr. Santos is concerned about perimeter drainage around the foundations of the house, which are perforated plastic pipes about 4 inches in diameter, which are not the same construction as a sanitary city main.
Is it possible that the roots going down 18 inches could damage those big oak pipes?
No, in the opinion of staff, no.
Okay. And I was just one little thing, when I was looking at the calendar of events, why was the tree put down in, I think it was 2018, and the fine received in 2019? What was the reasoning behind that?
Through your worship to Councillor Day, we wish to extend every bit of fairness to Mr. Santos. There appeared to be damage to several trees. To staff, there appeared to be damage to, 4 trees plus 1 removed. However, we wanted to have a third-party opinion as to assess fines, and we also wanted a third-party opinion as to see if the conditions of the trees and our opinion was that the trees was not sufficiently damaged that they needed removal.
Okay, and my last question, sorry, just one last one, Mr. Brody. If the neighbors are complaining about branches falling down on their property, and if the neighbors, in collusion with Mr. Santos, came to the city and said, we're really concerned about this, what would the city's position be in that situation?
Through your worship to Councillor Day, the city is bound by the criteria of the tree protection bylaw. I mean, if oftentimes in development situations, neighboring trees are applied for removal by the proponent, but it makes no difference to our assessment of the tree.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Green.
Thank you. I just wanted to ask a couple questions about developers. So it says that developers can take down trees, but would not these trees have been assessed as part of the development of this house quite recently?
Through your worship to Councillor Green, in the approvals for construction of Mr. Santos's house, it was identified that the conifers in the back were to be retained. The ones that he has stated were allowed to be removed were ones that were too close to the house, or they were subordinate, or they lived under a tree canopy, and there were straggly little trees.
Okay, so trees that were in conflict or in poor state, they were removed when this house was developed, but these ones were identified to be retained.
Yes.
Okay, so then if a developer was to build and the trees were to be retained, wouldn't there be a tree security deposit? And if they damaged the tree, wouldn't there be requirement to replace it with a specimen tree and then have a further deposit?
Through your worship to Councillor Green, I think the situation is one of a straight building permit, and not one that was identified as tree retention was not identified as an item of development permit. So I refer that question to Mr. Jaggs, who's with us as well, and he would know more about the details of what would happen in a development permit situation.
Well, is this a development permit situation?
No, it is not, Your Worship.
All right.
I just want to make sure that we're being fairly applied for what developers are expected to do, that we're in a fair situation.
Yeah, with respect, it's not a development permit situation. All right, anybody else have any questions? All right, so the recommendation is that the decision be upheld, or there can be some kind of a modification or reversal. I'll take a motion. Somebody?
You're upheld.
I'm sorry, who was that, Harold?
Harold, I'd like to move that the staff action be upheld.
All right, so it's moved that it's upheld. Is that seconded? And that's seconded. Any discussion on that? Councillor Wolf.
Thank you. Yes, just not a question, just from observation from this morning, bright and early with the sun coming up. I saw it shining on those trees, and a large flock of birds popped in and used it in the canopy for a little while before they left. Seems like a very healthy stand of trees. We're also very fortunate that at the time of the development of this house, that those trees were able to be protected because they were at the back of the property line, and it wasn't impacted by the height change of the property or the preloading. And all the work that went on to build the house. So I think we're very fortunate as a community, and I think the owner with concerns of drainage, trees do assist with drainage if you let them work with you. So yeah, I'm happy to second the uphold motion from Parent.
All right.
Thanks.
Okay, so Michael, there you go. So we'll call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? Anyone opposed? All right, so that is carried. And I'll take a motion to adjourn. So that's moved and seconded. All those in favor, opposed? Carried. We'll now call to order the Open General Purposes Committee meeting. May I have a motion to adopt the minutes of the GP meeting on October 19th? Moved and seconded. Discussion, errors and omissions. Okay. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. The first item of business is the recommendation to award the contract. I understand, Lloyd B., you're going to speak to this matter?
Yes, I am, Your Worship.
Anything you want to add to the report?
I have nothing to add, Your Worship.
All right. I'm not seeing Councilor, just hang on. Councilor Steves, you had a question or something?
Oh, I guess, no, sorry about that.
Okay. All right. So it's been moved and seconded. Discussion on it. All those in favor? Any opposed? That is carried. Brings us to the land use contract issues. Wayne Craig, Cynthia Lucier, anything you want to highlight or add?
Nothing to add, Your Worship. This is consistent with our approach on past land use contracts.
How many more of these do you think there are?
Through Your Worship, we have 2 more geographic areas after this one still to deal with.
Okay. Let's see. We've got questions. Councillor Green.
I just have something.
Sorry. Let's get it on the floor, okay? Do you want to move it?
Oh, sure.
Yeah, okay. Moved and seconded. Go ahead, Kelly.
I just have some concerns about not doing the early termination. Why would we not just bundle that in there?
Through Your Worship, to Councillor Green, unlike the single-family land use contracts where there was adverse development impacts associated with the land use contracts, the multifamily, commercial, and industrial don't suffer from that same affliction. We have not seen any sort of redevelopment of those commercial, multifamily, or industrial land use contracts. They would generally have to follow a rezoning application in order to proceed.
My concern is that some of the properties that have been identified are very affordable, and we'd just kind of be hoping nothing goes forward between now and 2024, which is, that's 4 years. A lot can change.
Through Your Worship, to Councillor Green, application of zoning really wouldn't do anything different with respect to those properties. The zoning being recommended at this time is a duplication of the regulations in the land use contract.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Day. No, you're muted, Carol.
There were 15 inquiries on GP 20. Has that all been resolved, or has there been another flood of inquiries? Where are we at with the public on this?
Through Your Worship, to Councillor Day, no, those inquiries were received during our pre-notification process. Should this proceed through committee and council next week, there would be additional notification prior to the public hearing. We would likely expect additional questions prior to that public hearing, but at present there has been nothing new.
Okay, so just to be clear, we don't have to worry about a bunch of applications for 3-story houses with sun decks on the 3rd floor. This is not the same case as what we were dealing with in West Wind.
Through your worship to Councillor Day, that's correct. It's a much different situation.
Okay, thank you so much.
All right, anybody else have any questions, comments, concerns? All right, we'll call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? That's carried. Now, number 3, the Brooke Pooney application on Bridgeport. We'll hear from staff. I'm told that the applicant is on the phone and wishes to be admitted to the meeting. Councillor Day, is your hand still up from the previous? Is that what it is? Good deal. All right. So, Wayne, Nathan Andrews, anything to add to your report?
Nothing to add, Your Worship. This would simply provide the applicant the opportunity to continue to operate under a temporary use permit for 3 years while they look for a suitably zoned site.
I think it was some time ago. I think I talked to you about this when I got an inquiry about it, asking the obvious question, which is, why didn't we just rezone it? But I take it that staff feel that if we open this up to this kind of a business with retail, the retail component, it would significantly change the zoning in a very large area and would form a precedent that we may not want to live with. Is that fair to say?
Yes, Your Worship, that is correct. It is staff's opinion that introducing retail to this location would be contrary to the city's objectives for industrial preservation and industrial densification, and that there are plenty of appropriately zoned properties within the city.
All right. Councillor Wolf, you have a question, or do you want to wait till after the delegation?
I had a question actually first.
Go.
And also, I'm noticing when Mr. Craig speaks, I get a lot of echo. I'm not sure if other people are there. Oh, there. Anyhow, my question was, I believe what we're allowing here with the temporary use retail ability is they would be allowed to do it throughout the day, all the days that they're open. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay. And then my follow-up is: are there other locations similar to this where it's like industrial land and they don't have retail all hours, all days of the week, but they have like a single day agreement where maybe it's just on Saturdays or just for a few hour window in the middle of the day? Is there any agreements that exist like that?
Through your worship to Councillor Wolf, no. Zoning basically entrenches the land use unless there is a specific requirement within the city's business licensing bylaws. There are no provisions for limited retail as you've described.
Okay, I appreciate that. Thanks for clarifying that.
Okay, Councillor McNulty, do you want to wait for the delegation?
No, I would like to
Go ahead.
ask Mr. Craig a question, if I can.
Yeah.
What kind of precedent does this set? I understand these people were conducting business for I don't know how long in the report without a business license for it. What's to prevent others from doing the same and then coming and applying, say, oops, sorry, we made a mistake. Would you rezone us or would you give us a license, please?
Through your worship to Councillor McNulty, in terms of the business licenses for this business, they have been very specific to wholesale, which is a permitted use within this area. We have recommended to council on other occasions temporary use permits to allow for businesses to continue to operate while they relocate. Recently, we've had temporary use permits for schools that have come forward for council consideration. In this specific instance, the applicant is committed to looking for appropriately zoned site during the term of this temporary use permit.
But they were conducting retail before, and that's the question. They didn't have a license to do so. Are we warning somebody for bad behavior?
Through your worship to Councillor McNulty, I wouldn't go as far as to suggest that we're rewarding bad behavior. I think this is an allowance to continue to operate. In terms of the business, the bylaw compliance aspect, I'd refer that to Carly Williams if you have any further questions in terms of bylaw enforcement related to this type of activity.
Okay, well, I'm just reading your report on page 76. Yep.
All right, Councillor Day. Bill, your hand's still up.
Yeah, thank you very much. Mr. Craig, was this a complaint from a competitor, or was this a complaint regarding parking? Like, how did this come in?
Through your worship to Councillor Day, I'd refer that question to Ms. Williams to respond to, as she's responsible for the Community Bylaws Department.
Carly?
Thank you. Through Councillor Day, to your worship, we did receive a complaint that this business, actually we received several complaints that this business was offering retail, and so we investigated it. When we take complaints, we do not differentiate on the motivation of the complaint or who it came from, but it was not about parking. It was that they were in non-compliance with the zoning bylaw.
Okay, and I've actually been in this store. I remember this place. As I recall, it was originally set up kind of almost like for builders to go in and purchase, like 5 or 6 appliances. And then over time, because I'm not sure, I believe they closed a retail outfit that they had on the corner of Kingsway and Main Street. And then after that, I believe, I could be wrong, that people started coming directly into that store instead of the signature store that was on Kingsway. Do you have any recollection of that?
Through the chair to Councillor Day, no, I don't know how this evolved or when it came to be.
Okay, I'll ask for a proponent. Thank you so much.
All right. So that segues into the proponent. The proponent is with us. I'm sorry? She does? Linda, did you raise your hand? Your mute's on. Did you?
On my end, it shows it being up.
Oh, okay. Anyway, carry on.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you to staff. So this is a 3-year temporary use, and at the end of 3 years, if there is a possibility they could ask for another 3 years. Is that correct?
Your worship to Councillor McPhail, yes, this temporary use permit would be valid for 3 years. They could apply for renewal at termination of that 3 years. It is our understanding, based on the letters provided, that the applicant is committed to finding an appropriately zoned site within the 3-year period.
All right, thank you. And on our GP 76, the second to bottom left paragraph, you mentioned our industrial land intensification initiative. And when do you expect that to be due? Because, I think originally it was going to be 1 or 2 years, but it's gone over that time period. And I know Metro Vancouver just released their report recently, so just wondering when our report is coming.
Through your worship to Councillor McPhail, we do anticipate that will come forward for council consideration shortly, I would say early in the new year.
Thank you.
All right, any other comments, questions? All right, sorry.
We just disconnected the call by accident, so we're calling them back.
Okay, with the best of intentions?
They're in?
Sorry, they're in?
Yes.
Someone's telling us yes. Apologies go out to the delegation. Apparently, by mistake, rather than putting them into the main room, we disconnected them. But I'm told they are back. So
I am here. Yes.
Okay. So if we could get you to introduce yourself, and you've read the report, and tell us what's on your mind.
Yes, thank you, everybody, and thank you to the staff for taking the time to prepare the report. Yeah, I just wanted to make myself available if there's any questions that had come from the report that you have in front of you here. My name is Lee Matot. I'm the president and owner of Midland Appliance at 1365 Bridgeport. I took over ownership of the business from the previous owner, who had been operating in Richmond for over 20 years, and out of this location here at 1365 for what would now be just over 12 years. And yes, to Councillor Day's earlier comment, the business was founded with developers, contractors, cabinet partners in mind. It was never intended to be a retail appliance dealer. Our focus today remains on the B2B segment of the market with builders, designers, architects, and so on. However, the nature of the industry has changed in that most new construction or major renovation, for whatever reason, it seems to now in large part be the homeowners who are responsible for purchasing the appliances as opposed to the builders. Builders are responsible for the lumber and the foundation and the roofing and the flooring, but for whatever reason, the homeowners seem to be the one who often are responsible for purchasing the appliances directly. So oftentimes we do, a majority of our portion is working directly with the builders, but some builders want their homeowners to purchase appliances directly. And that is the crux of the issue that we found ourselves in. We genuinely didn't know that we were in violation of the zoning. We were operating in good faith. And once it was made clear to us that we were not in compliance with the zoning, I've had multiple conversations with Carly Williams over the years. We immediately took steps to try to be in compliance with the zoning and have since done that. It has had an impact on our business, but that, I guess, is almost secondary. And so as we work through this process, we are currently looking for a location that is more suitable. Right? Our focus isn't retail. We will never be retail. You're not going to see a Black Friday or a Boxing Week promotion from us. That's not our business. Our focus is on the builders. But given the fact that so many builders want their homeowners to purchase directly, we now know that we are no longer in line with the zoning, so we need to find a new location that allows us to do that. So we were operating in good faith. I hope that the Councillor McNulty takes me at my word. We genuinely didn't know, and as soon as we were made aware, we took action. So we're just asking for a temporary use to allow us to be able to continue to serve our customers and their customers while we look for a permanent location that is in line with the zoning that the city requires.
All right, we have a couple of questions. First of all, from Councillor Day.
Mayor Brody, thank you, Mr. Matad. So you're the new owner, because I do recall Midland Appliance had a shop on 4th Avenue. They had one on Kingsway and Main Street, and there was another one closer to Knight Street. And that's where normally, a retail customer would go. I have been inside your shop. I know you have sort of that clearance area in the back. So is it your intention to potentially keep this location for the wholesale side of it, and then
Carol, you must have something over your microphone because you're very...
Nothing.
Well,
Nothing.
It's difficult to detect what you're saying, so...
I'll move a little closer. Does that help?
I hope so.
Okay. I don't ask me. Technology. You had a retail store, I believe it was on Kingsway near Main Street. Is it your vision that you would open up something like that again?
Yeah, so we have another location at Columbia and 4th currently. That was the one that moved from our old Kingsway location. And so I think your question, what I had heard is, do we have the intention of keeping this location open while also opening a secondary location? If I understood that correctly, and the answer to that is would be no. We are looking for one location that would allow us to serve all of our customers, as opposed to have to send some to one location and then some to another location in close proximity. We want to ultimately find something that allows us to serve all of those customers.
Thank you.
All right, Councillor Green. Carol, your hand's up.
Thank you. Through to the applicant, I just have a question about your retail customers. So are all your retail customers working with builders, or are some of them genuinely on their own?
Yeah, so we don't do the sort of business that maybe like a Home Depot or like a Brick would do. If someone's coming in and looking for a replacement dishwasher because it broke, or a set of laundry, that's not really our customer. We're dealing with new home construction and major renovations. So we're very, we're not really selling the one-off type of package. Now, previously, that was a customer that we weren't marketing to, but if they came in, we would address. But as soon as it was made clear to us that that was in violation of the zoning, we immediately stopped doing that.
Okay, so it sounds like all your customers would have builders associated with them. I think I have a question of staff, about how this comes together.
Well, fair enough. Just hold on. We'll finish with the applicant. Anyone else? Anyone else have any questions? Okay, thank you, Mr. Mathot. Thank you for clarifying that for us. We'll carry on now with the meeting. And go back to Councillor Green. You had a question of staff.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. My question to staff is that if the customers are all working with the builder, like I've done renovations before where, you know, you can go to the tile store, but your contractor has to be the number on file because they won't deal with you otherwise. Like, so you have to have a builder in order to purchase the products. So is this the same situation? And if they all have builders associated with them, would they not be wholesale?
Through your worship to Councillor Green, yes, in terms of a business transaction, a business-to-business transaction is consistent with the existing zoning. It's the retail sale to the end consumer that is not compliant with the current zoning.
So in the case that the example that I just had, where you go to a tile store, but you can't purchase unless you have a builder saying that you're working on a project with them, doesn't count? Through your worship to Councillor Green, if the product is purchased by the business and it is a business-to-business transaction through that is compliant with zoning. So I believe the instance that the applicant described is the purchase is by the homeowner, not by the business. So any purchase by an individual would not be compliant with the zoning. Okay, thank you.
Let's see now, Councillor Day.
Hi, everybody can hear me? So I'm a little concerned Midland Appliance has been around for decades, and I think it's a three-generation business, and they've been 12 years in that location. And I understand we do not want to lose our industrial properties. I 100% get that. But my question to staff is, given that we're going to be looking at the industrial intensification report maybe next January, February, if we go ahead and give them the 3 years to be compliant, is it possible that we could find a way to allow, to some degree, this business to continue to operate the way it has operated, which is mostly wholesale to wholesale, but some retail business? Because it just seems to me the world is changing. People are doing a lot of online shopping, and maybe we need to get more modern.
Through your worship to Councillor Day, in terms of whether there would be a wholesale change related to retail activity in industrial land, that will be dealt with as part of the Industrial Land Intensification Initiative, which will come forward. As noted in the staff report, this applicant did submit a zoning text amendment to legitimize the retail use through a zoning application. Staff's assessment right now is that the Industrial Land Intensification Initiative will actually strengthen the prohibitions on retail within bona fide industrial areas. I would also point out that west of Knight Street, the city's industrial retail zone does allow for direct retailing of large household appliances. That is why you see IKEA in that location. That is why you see Home Depot and many other furniture and building suppliers that retail directly to consumers.
I think we might need to be a little more flexible. Thank you very much for that. I look forward to that report in the new year.
Councillor Steves.
Yeah, I'd just like to make a comment. I really support the staff report. Here on council, several times when we extended the area of sales from industrial to regular commercial. Initially, when I was on council, it was supposed to include Richmond Center and Lansdowne, and someone came up with the idea, well, we want to build something in the corner of Cambie and 3 Road, and suddenly we expanded the town center from Lansdowne Road to number 3 Road. Then somebody came up, well, we want to build something here. And eventually IKEA came along and said, we want to be by the highway where everybody can see us. And we suddenly approved everything all the way from Granville Avenue and 3 all the way to IKEA. And the area in between there and IKEA was all industrial, and was never intended to have any commercial there at all. But we did a favor to IKEA, and pretty soon we had everybody else over in that corner. So I think it's wise that we do contain our boundaries and we don't keep on expanding them. And I certainly support the staff report.
All right, so do you want to move the recommendation?
I sure will. Thank you.
All right, so that's moved and seconded.
Second.
Okay, anyone want to speak further to it? All right, we'll call the question. All those in favor? Anybody opposing that? That is carried. Thank you. Now we move to the nonprofit social service agency space need policy options. Speaking of that, Kim Somerville and Leslie Sherlock. Staff, do you want to give us a brief rundown of the situation that you find in that report?
Yes, I'll give a brief summary. This report responds to a council referral that includes 2 requests. The first being that staff seek immediate opportunities to prevent the loss of at-risk, high-priority social service agency space, and secondly, to identify options to increase the supply of affordable nonprofit social service agency space. With respect to the first request, that of preventing the loss of at-risk space, a replacement and accommodation policy is proposed to ensure that nonprofit tenants to be displaced by redevelopment would be ensured of replacement space at 50% of market rent in perpetuity. The space would be developer-owned and secured for NPO use by a legal agreement. The impacted NPOs would have the first right of refusal to occupy the replacement space. If they choose to stay, however, at their interim location, the space would be leased to another nonprofit approved by the city. The proposed policy is similar to an agreement secured for NPO use in the recently approved spin rezoning on Mineral Boulevard, whereby replacement space will be provided for the Richmond Society for Community Living and the Community Mental Wellness Association of Canada. This was arranged outside of policy, so a policy is needed to ensure that this approach can be replicated. With respect to the second part of the referral, that of increasing the supply of affordable NPO space, existing density bonus provisions in the zoning bylaw for community amenity space may be used for this purpose, and the recommendation would provide staff with direction to do so. Using these provisions would not detrimentally impact contributions for civic facilities, as they're not intended for civic purposes. To further increase the supply of nonprofit space, other measures may be taken. However, economic analysis is required to determine viable and effective approaches based on project and land use economics, as well as the need for functional space. Furthermore, COVID-19 impacts on supply and demand would need to be considered, so the analysis would be initiated in the second quarter of 2021, when those impacts may be better understood. And staff anticipate the results will be shared with Council in the fourth quarter of 2021. Following Council's review of the analysis, consultation would be undertaken with the RCSAC, Richmond Caring Place Society, Urban Development Institute, senior governments, public partners, and other stakeholders. Based on the results of the analysis and consultation, a proposed policy framework, including an interdepartmental staff review process and criteria, would be proposed for Council's consideration. The first 2 recommendations would be in effect as soon as approved by Council, while the second 2 recommendations pertain to future actions. I would be happy to respond to any questions you might have.
All right, we've got a number of people asking questions, a number of councillors. So what, you said right at the end about the recommendations. So basically, to expand, to use the density bonus provisions, do your economic analysis and come back with policy options. So what you're proposing here is really step one of two major steps.
Well, yes, there are two steps that can be undertaken right away, and that is the replacement accommodation policy. Yes, could be adopted, and the density program both can be implemented.
The existing possibility. Okay.
Yeah.
We'll go to Councillor McNulty.
Yeah, thank you, Worship. Well, first of all, this report was long overdue. A good report and a good step in the right direction. I do have a number of questions, if I may, Your Worship. I'm not sure who's going to be answering them. You mentioned, Leslie, that we've consulted RCSAC on this. And how does this mesh with their paper that they gave us a number of years ago?
Through Your Worship to Councillor McNulty, this is the follow-up report. The RCSAC report was presented about a year ago, and it included a very general overview of the nonprofit space needs in Richmond. When that report was presented, there was a referral to staff to provide agency-specific information, which we did several months later. So that was provided, and then this referral is in response to the agency-specific information. So it follows directly from the work initiated by the RCSAC.
But did we implement many of their recommendations here?
Their recommendations would be addressed by these.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
A couple, actually mechanical things. I think it gives some direction. I think we've got a ways to go yet on this. This will do for now. But I have a question in terms of incentives, and you may not be able to answer, but Mr. Craig, is there a limit on density of what we would give? For example, we turned down a development on Minaroo until the developer looked after two nonprofit groups. But what if a developer said, I'll let 5 or 6 groups in my major development and I'll provide for it? I notice we've got 5% or whatever it is on the page. Would we not negotiate that as opposed to put a limit on it and say it's automatic, you get 0.1 or 0.2? We might give them 0.3 if it was a great project.
Through Your Worship to Councillor McNulty, in terms of the report, it's recommending two things: one-to-one replacement if you have an existing nonprofit on the property. In terms of incentives, the existing density bonus within the zoning bylaw is typically 0.2 FAR. In terms of your question of if we had a property owner who was willing to do more, we would look at that on a case-by-case basis and bring that forward to council for direction as part of our rezoning.
As a matter of fact, we are going to have one very shortly, and that is Lansdowne. There may be some opportunities to continue to increase more than what's already proposed there, and that's why I bring it up. I think that's why I asked, would we negotiate it? The other question I have, and I'm very concerned about the 50% market rent, because if people are getting even 50% today, and in 5 years' time, market rent can go through the roof. Is there anything here to protect groups of what that rent would be 3, 4, 5 years down the road when that will be finished?
Through Your Worship to Councillor McNulty, that would have to be renegotiated at a future date. This policy would be limited to the 50%.
Yeah, maybe I could ask Mr. Craig, could that be put in at the time of application for development?
Through Your Worship to Councillor McNulty, in terms of mechanics, what we would do is we register a legal agreement as a condition of the rezoning. The rezoning would, that legal agreement would specify it's 50% of market. That would apply to the original tenant when they move in. That tenant would then be subject to the standard rent increases that may occur in accordance with provincial legislation. If that space became vacant and needed to be re-tenanted, the rent level would be re-reviewed in terms of what the existing market rents are in the area for compatible space. the rent would then be cut in half.
Okay. All right. Well, just my comments. Thank you for those answers. A good step in the right direction. Hopefully more to come and more to do. Thank you.
Councillor Liu.
Thank you, Worship. Thank you to staff for creating this, and I know that this is something that's been top of mind for all of us as we create more and more affordable housing in the city centre, and then we're essentially also squeezing out some of our not-for-profits that are serving many of these people and people in the city centre that need support. My concern, or what worries me a little bit, is our replacement and accommodation policy. I agree we need to do something. I don't know that a one-to-one replacement is necessarily the way to go. So you have one developer that happened to have a whole bunch of not-for-profits leasing from them before they redeveloped, and now they suddenly have to provide a whole ton of it, versus the next person that comes along, they manage to not have anybody in there, and so now they're not required to produce any. And so it seems to me that if we're looking at something, we want them to somehow support the not-for-profit in moving. Chances are that not-for-profit is not coming back. We've seen Richmond Centre for Disability, that one, they moved it out a couple of years ago. The shovels aren't in the ground yet, and it might be years before that space is available. So even though they were promised to be able to come back in 5 years, I don't think they're going to have a building within that 5-year time frame. And once they've built out their other spot, it doesn't necessarily make sense for them to come back anyway. So what it does make sense is for us to have some sort of supports for them to get a new place when the developer redevelops. What does also make sense is when we create some sort of percentage of the floor space of the new development that requires it. So I think it makes sense to maybe wait until that happens. I agree that we need to do something, but I don't know that the whole one-to-one replacement space and all that, I think that provision is just going to create a headache for staff, for the developer, and for the not-for-profit who's already in there. I think that's not actually going to solve the problem of them getting moved out. I think we need something a little more amenable that works with both the groups.
Staff, do you have any comment on that?
Well, I see it as one option to help ensure that square footage is not lost for social service purposes. The density bonus provisions can create new space, which would provide an option for the nonprofits to move into. And if they prefer, they could stay there, and then the replacement space would be made available to another. And the proposed economic analysis would also look at the possibility of building in density bonuses in the city center area plan, for example, specifically for nonprofits. But we have to first determine if that's viable.
Right. And so what I'm thinking is if we're able to have those density bonuses for all developments, so whether or not they previously had a not-for-profit in them, but they still get that density bonus and they basically have to produce some space for our not-for-profits, that'll increase the square footage available to all of them, and that'll create less of a crunch as we go forward with each rezoning as it happens. So I like the direction this is going, and I just think it maybe needs a little refining, that's all.
Well, I'd like to kind of extend that conversation with Wayne Craig if we could. I mean, the point has been made, I think, effectively that, heartless developer kicks everybody out a year before he develops or applies. And then there's no expectation that they provide anything for the not-for-profits, whereas responsible applicant leaves them in there right up to and past the application date. I mean, are you going to just, when you get an application, just say, do you have any not-for-profit space right now? Is it that simple, or do you look at the history of the thing?
Through your worship, we would be looking at whether there are nonprofits on the property at time of application. We would not be looking back at historic lease records. We have to base it on whether there is a nonprofit at time of application submission.
It just seems to me that that's really subject to abuse, and I think that was Councillor Liu's point.
Well, also, I was thinking we just want to make sure we have more supply in general. So, like, it's a holistic approach to applying this.
Right. All right, Councillor Day.
So I was really pleased at the timeline on this. I mean, the nonprofit social services agency space needs report came September 29th, and now here we are already coming up with policy changes. So kudos to staff for getting this rolling as quickly as possible. You know, we saw how many nonprofits in the downtown core went into panic mode because of the rapid redevelopment of the downtown core. So I'm really pleased that we're going to be able to help them before they're all gone. So my question, though, was I have a little concern, and I actually think that Councilor Liu brought up a good point, that maybe we need to broaden this. But I wanted to go to the actual policy, which is on GP 112. And under the heading Nonprofit Tenant Eligibility, it states in the second paragraph that in addition to social services, this policy would apply to other nonprofit sectors. Example, arts, recreation. That's not a social service. I'm not sure that I can support that. What was the reason for putting that in there?
Through your worship to Councillor Day, the policy in the zoning bylaw does pertain to social, cultural, and recreational opportunities. That is the wording of the zoning bylaw provision. So this is not proposing a change to that.
Okay, so when it says example, arts, recreation, that could mean a lot of things. Do we need to strengthen the wording on that to make sure that it is social and cultural and art recreation?
Well, through your worship to Councillor Day, we have to make sure that that the policy is broad enough to respect what is already in the zoning bylaw, unless we change that. And it is quite an open-ended description, so that it is something that could be narrowed if council so desires.
Unless I see a compelling reason to either keep it in and revise it to add social cultural, then I would move that we strike that example, arts, recreation, because that's not a nonprofit social development organization. So, thank you.
All right, Councillor Rao.
Yes, so, Your Worship. I think you have already raised some of the concerns that I have. Yes, I like the idea that we have this replacement policy for the NGOs. However, I'm also concerned about the unintended consequences. For one, it's already mentioned that the developer can just let those leases be lapsed, be terminated before they really apply for development. But it can also cause another problem, which is the existing owners will be reluctant to rent space to NPOs right now, immediately, because they have for fear that they could be hindered in the future for any development application. So as much as we want to help the NPOs by having this policy, but we also have to consider the unintended consequences that can be raised. So do we have an idea is how many NPOs right now we have in the city center area, which with their buildings that could be developed in the future? Do you have some kind of numbers?
Yes, through your worship to Councillor Au, when the agency-specific survey was done, there were 4 agencies identified that are at risk of redevelopment due to their short-term leases with no option to renew.
Okay, but I understand. Go ahead.
This policy does just apply to those organizations that are already in premises that are subject to rezoning.
All right, Councillor Green.
Thank you, and I wanted to thank staff for bringing forward this first step. I think it's pretty clear that there's opportunity in the future to do more and fine tune this, and I very much look forward to those recommendations and that work. But I think we need to get something going. My big concern has been echoed by a few other people, though, which is protection of eviction for tenants, especially in the older buildings. They all have a demolition clause in their contracts, so they can be thrown out quite easily. So what are we doing to protect these folks in that situation?
Through your worship to Councillor Green, this policy doesn't extend to a protection otherwise, but seeing as it was successfully accomplished in the bin rezoning, we're hoping that that will be applicable to other developments as well.
Your Worship, it's Joe. If I can just add to that, I think the thing to keep in mind is that for existing non-profits, you are talking about a rezoning situation. So in the event that a developer or a landlord deals or is dealing with non-profits in an inappropriate way, or has recently cleansed the building of non-profits, that's definitely something that you and the city can take into consideration as part of the rezoning. So I don't believe that developers will take that risk, because ultimately it could jeopardize their successful rezoning. And, and really the first half of the recommendations are designed to do something immediately in an area where there's currently no protection. The second half of the recommendations are intended to do some research and create incentive to increase the supply of space for non-profits.
Thank you for that. I think it is important that we do take a first step, that we don't delay. But I do want to see the rest of it come back, particularly there was a lot of talk about co-locating and how much benefit is generated for the community and the people that access those services, as well as the nonprofits. And I think that that's something that we really need to keep in mind whenever possible.
All right. So Joe, I take it that your comments somewhat modify the approach that Mr. Craig had when he was addressing a similar question.
Yes, Mr. Craig's view was that we would in particular be looking at who was on the site at the time of application, and that is correct.
Yeah.
But, I would add to that and say that if it's obvious to the city, and I believe that it would be made obvious to us, that a site had been sort of cleansed of non-profits shortly before application for rezoning, that's something that I think would become part of the rezoning considerations.
Well, I just wonder whether the answer to this would be to take a motion to adopt the staff recommendations, but give direction to staff to take a look at that specific issue to see whether you feel that there's a need to make slight modifications to the policy to address that particular issue. And hopefully you can do that within the week by the time it gets to council next week. Does that seem a reasonable approach, Mr. Erskine?
Yes, it does, Your Worship.
Okay. So let's get a motion on the floor. Someone want to move it?
So moved.
So that's moved and seconded, and the corollary would be what I said.
With the corollary, yeah.
Yeah, the corollary would be that we would direct staff to take a look at the issue of time of applications, status as of time of applications, the history of the matter, the demolition clauses that might pertain to the situation, etc. Okay, so that's moved and seconded. Councillor Day. Okay.
Also, I
think that I would like to have some clarification on that second line in the third paragraph, nonprofit tenant eligibility, where it says nonprofit sector is example, art, recreation. I would need to have that clarified before on the next go round.
Your Worship, if I may, just briefly.
Yeah, please.
My suggestion would be to leave the policy quite broad, and again, you will be able to take a detailed look at the specifics of the organizations when you receive the rezoning. And if for some reason that you feel that it's inappropriate to make an accommodation for a particular group, you're under no obligation to do that. So I think that a broad policy is good, on the understanding that council will be able to take a look at the specifics of the organization when it comes to you as part of a rezoning.
Yeah, I have to say from my point of view, I don't have a problem with the wording as it is, but maybe with more explanation, I'll see something or something. All right, Councillor McPhail, your raising your hand function doesn't seem to work. So you better resort to the old-fashioned what you just did. Okay, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. I did have a couple of questions for staff. Economic analysis, who will be conducting that? Will that be done in-house or will be hiring a consultant?
Through Your Worship to Councillor McPhail, we would be seeking assistance from a land economist for that.
And I know in the report you said that you have money in the current budget, so it's not going to be extra. That's great. Now, on GP 107, there's mention of a province-wide social purpose real estate collaborative survey. Who is doing that? Is that the province?
No, that is a group called the Social Purpose Real Estate Collaborative, and the City of Richmond is a member. There are 6 municipalities that are members of that table, and it includes investors and funders in social purpose real estate.
Okay, that's really interesting. Now, in the report, there's a lot of emphasis about the city center area plan, and I know that when we heard from the nonprofits, a lot of them want to stay in the city center area to serve the clients, and that makes a lot of sense to be close to transit and other things. But we talked about other appropriate locations, and so perhaps this is more to Councillor Liu's point about looking at a broader policy citywide. Do we know where some of those other locations in the city could be, or is that something that will come up at a later time?
Through Your Worship to Councillor McPhail, there is a need for services in other areas, for example, in Hamilton, Steveston, East Cambie, various locations. The city center is an excellent location in that it is so accessible by transit, and for so many other uses. So it really is ideal, but there is a need for other locations as well.
Great, thanks very much.
Okay, anyone else? All right, we'll call the question on the motion. All those in favor? Anybody opposed to that? Nope. All right, so that's carried. Thanks, staff. I'll go now to the city center area with Spires Road. And my suggestion, I see we've got 2 different speakers for 5 and 6. But I suggest we hear from Barry on the development permit guidelines, and then go to Alex or other staff about the park land use. Just let's hear it all, and then we'll separate it out by resolution. So Barry, what do you want to tell us about Spires?
Thank you, Your Worship, to members of council. The report does respond to the referral that we received to institute new development permit guidelines for the Spires Road neighborhood. That has been drafted in the report before you to come up with a set of guidelines that will achieve a more traditional pitched roof, a more established character for this area. And through that work, we've also been working with our Parks Department to look at some potential amendments to the park allocation and walkway system through the area. We're happy to answer any questions that council may have on both reports.
All right, did we want to hear something on the parks separately?
Through your worship, if that's required, yeah, Mr. Krasinski is available as well if you would like more information on that.
Well, let's hear about parks.
Good evening, everyone. Alex Krasinski, Parks Planner. The 4 lots in question were designated in 2009 as placeholders for future park development. And as the area developed over the years, namely in 2010 when the city purchased the Garden City lands, the area greatly benefited with an increase in park space. So we feel that the changing the land use designation from parks to the proposed designation is a good urban planning decision and approach, and we would like to have council's approval to proceed with public consultation to get input from our community.
And I may add as well, Your Worship, one is that the consultation that we've requested for the parks would be done in tandem with the land use changes in terms of the road layout. That way we would take one consultation package forward to speak to the neighborhood about park and road realignments in the area.
All right, now I take it, I just want to make sure we're all on the same page to start the discussion. Now I take it if we look to GP 133, this shows the existing road network for Spires Road, right? On top. Yes, Barry?
Yes.
Attachment 5. Barry, you are muted. You are muted, Barry. Barry, unmute yourself.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm trying to get to the appropriate pages at the same time, so I do apologize for that. So 133, the top of that page shows the existing road network in the area, and the bottom diagram shows that under the current CCAP, the area to the east side, as well as the central portion of Cook Crescent, were to be closed. We found that we are recommending and suggesting that if you look at the concept on the following page, which is attachment 6 and page GP 134, we would like to revise that road network to maintain portions of Spires Road and then change that alignment to a series of cul-de-sacs going northward into the neighborhood, connected by a potential pedestrian walkway between those two cul-de-sacs leading to Saba Road.
Now, I take it that the problem area in terms of the city center area plan and the OCP, therefore, is the eastern end on the bottom of the lower diagram on page 133. If you look at it from where that number 1 is, the red number 1, over to Garden City is very, very deep. And that's one of the things you're trying to remedy by having the new road alignment, which would service the whole area, that whole area much more effectively. Is that correct?
Through Your Worship, that is correct, yes. We've been experiencing difficulty in assembling lands, and we also had some servicing issues that have now been resolved in terms of providing adequate servicing to the eastern portion. So we feel that the revised road network would, in fact, see the type of development that council envisioned for this area through the CCAP, which has been very slow to be taken up by the community.
Then in terms of a greenway within the Spires Road area, if you look to page 135, with the modified configuration, you'll see the green areas which will be park, and then the pedestrian linkages in the heavy dotted line. That's what is envisioned. Yes?
Through Your Worship, that's correct, and that is what Mr. Krasinski and Parks and Planning would propose to go speak to the community about to see if there's interest in that type of a land use and park space change.
All right, and the rationale for that is, in part, the reduced area for parks is on page 150, which it shows the parks within the vicinity of Spires and then parks within the 10-minute walking distance of Spires. The idea is that since we did the city center area plan, there's far more parks in that area than we envisioned. Is that correct?
Through your worship, that is correct. Mr. Krasinski can perhaps speak to that, but we have secured a significant amount of parking in the area.
Yeah, I would like to add, your worship, that not only did the city purchase the 136 acres of the Garden City lands in 2010, but also since that the CCAP was passed, and to this day, the city has purchased several lots along Eckersley to substantially increase the area of Cook Community School Park. And I would like to point to GP 148, and specifically, there are several lots along the top of Cook that are also designated for purchase in the future as they become available, and that is very much very easy walking distance of the Spires neighborhood area as well. So we feel that along with the large parks in the area, as well as the two greenways in the Spires Road neighborhood proper, and then furthermore the non-park but very much green and recreational in nature, the pedestrian muse and linkages in the community will create a rich network in this neighborhood of green and opportunities for alternative transportation and recreation.
Good. All right, so we have some questions. I'll go to Councillor Green.
Thanks for the report. It's very detailed, which is helpful. One of the details that I don't like, though, is that the pedestrian linkages have been taken out of the corners of the area that go basically get pedestrians straight to the parks, and they're just due east now instead of having those diagonal access points. How do we get back to the diagonal so we can get folks closer to their recreational opportunities without being on Garden City, which is incredibly busy?
Barry?
Through your worship, to Councillor Green, again, the CCAP identified conceptual park linkages. In our discussions with Mr. Krasinski and park staff, we feel that the linear proposal that's before you will still facilitate access to and from those park spaces for the neighborhood. Again, all of these will be determined through development in terms of where exactly they will be located, but our intention is to maintain that permeability for pedestrian movement through the area to make sure that they are accessing those park spaces as required.
Yes, and I like permeability, and I like pedestrian-oriented, and it seems like we're going in that direction, but that the last jog of the eastbound linear walkway, I'm looking on GP 135, the one that comes from Spires to Garden City, why would we not have one in each of the north and the south corners instead of just straight through? Because we want to have that permeability, and this is not particularly permeable. It dumps you out in the middle of the block.
Through your worship, to Councillor Green, perhaps Mr. Krasinski and or Mr. Gross can speak to the intent of a single access and how that addresses the accessibility to Garden City Park across Garden City Road.
Through your worship, to Councillor Green, I think first and foremost that green spine going east-west through the neighborhood area provides not only a recreational opportunity, but it's also an opportunity for emergency services. It's going to also function as a fire lane into the area, so it offers that permeability. But that said, I think we could probably take a better look at connecting and where folks land for a crossing point over to Garden City Road, Garden City Park across Garden City. So the point taken, we'll definitely consider that.
Can I move an amendment that we do that instead of having it as something that we'll look at in the future? Because what happens is this gets into the OCP and then it never changes.
First of all, you can't move an amendment because there's nothing on the floor. So we'll get back to you in due course.
Thank you.
Councillor Day.
So my question is, we're talking about potentially stacked townhouses. If we were to have a slightly higher, maybe 5, 6 story, couldn't we have more green space instead of this linear walkway? Couldn't we do better?
Through your worship to Councillor Day, we need perhaps direction or motion from council to go back and revisit the land uses. We were trying to focus specifically on what is permitted in the plan. This, if I may, to Councillor Day's question, this work began with the discussion of the referral on the design guidelines, and this type of a linear parkway which would create that east-west green spine serving as both pedestrian and emergency access actually further reinforces those guidelines in terms of its ground-oriented design and a pleasant pedestrian muse through the neighborhood. So we did not in any way look at increasing the density beyond what's permitted in the area plan. That would in fact be a larger change, and if that's so directed, we would again consult with the neighborhood on that type of a direction as well.
When you go to public consultation, will the option of doing that be presented to the public?
If I may, through your worship, Councillor Day, we don't have any direction to look at broader land use designations in the Spires Road area plan. If that was so directed by council, we would in fact be happy to have that consultation.
I think I'd like to have that as an option C or something whereby we look at, because I mean the airport will let us build maybe 4 or 5 stories, maybe 6, I don't know. Because you look at Ascot Wind, just at the corner of Cook Road and Garden City, you know, the garage is on the bottom floor, and you have 3, 4 levels above that. You know, I would rather see more open space and less townhouse rows. So, and then, yeah, that could be more livable. Thank you.
Councillor Day. Sorry, Councillor Liu. Councillor Liu.
Thank you, through the chair. So if I'm correct here, then looking at GP 119, because we're quite fixed on this concept of having this pitched roof design, that's what's reducing the available space to have amenity spaces on the roof, but it's also squeezing the outdoor space. Is that it too, because of the configuration of it?
Through your worship to Councillor Liu, the CCAP did establish a higher per units requirement of 30 square, or
37, right?
37, pardon me, thank you, Councillor. So we're recognizing that, you know, with a more flexible design, i.e. the more contemporary, that does offer some flat roof opportunities for open space, but it is harder to achieve. However, the 30 is consistent with most townhouse developments outside the city center. So we're seeing that if we're going to do one, we do have some impacts on the other in terms of the availability for private open space. However, it would be consistent with other townhouses in the city.
Okay, because, you know, for me, thinking about how I live and how my family lives, I think we'd rather have a bigger yard. And I'd rather have the bigger yard than pitched roofs, right? Like, I don't care about the roof particularly. Is there another way to create something that still maybe fits the look of the neighborhood? I understand how some of the neighbors maybe don't want this crazy mishmash of totally different designs, but is there a way to, you know, still create that space where you've got that extra yard space to just live and be outside versus, you know, giving that up just for the design element? Like, really, do you ever go and tell your friends, yeah, I got this great new place, it's got a pitched roof, right? You talk about how much space you have outside and how much ability your kids get to go outside and play, and or you can sit outside and share a meal or whatever else, right? You never talk about this roof. And so I'm wondering if we're just overly, you know, preventing ourselves from having what we actually want because we're so fixed on this pitch roof thing.
Through your worship to Council, we appreciate your comments. We're trying to address both the referral as was directed to staff, as well as looking at potential to fine-tune how the neighborhood would function to achieve both measures if possible. Again, with the referral, which I will point out, if we go with higher density to achieve a different character of this neighborhood, that will trigger extensive reviews of infrastructure, parks requirements, etc. There would be a larger can of worms opened, if you will. This is area also, through your worship, Councillor Liu, is characterized with stacked townhouse or structured townhouse, which requires a parking structure of the townhouses above, which does impose some other requirements in terms of achieving the open space per unit. We feel that reducing it slightly, as recommended in the staff report, will in fact still provide adequate open space while addressing the referral and creating the type of streetscape and that feel in the community that we think we can achieve with the proposal before you.
Right, Councillor Wolf.
Thank you. Just to clarify, should I be asking questions on both items right now, 5 and 6?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Great. I have 5 questions. The first one, I visited the area today. I grew up close to the area, so I'm very familiar with the roads as they are now. I noticed a house being built on Spires Road, and it's just getting the bricks laid on the driveway, and the whole side of the house is just getting brick laid. And to me, it looks like on the map, it's in the location where the north-south pedestrian linkage is set to go. Are you, staff, aware of this house? And if we're having trouble doing assembly plans, then perhaps we shouldn't be approving buildings that are going to be brand new and not necessarily want to get knocked down right away.
Through the chair to Councillor Wolf, this does occur sometimes in various areas. We do see that people are willing to use existing zoning and rebuild a house. We're seeing this, for example, in the area south of Aberdeen where it's identified for industrial reserve. You are allowed to use the zone that you have. This, again, would be some conceptual layouts in terms of the north-south, and if we had to adjust slightly, we would be doing that or trying to achieve it over the longer-term lifespan of the plan. Great. But your point is, I understand your point. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, you can see that they're actively trying to rush to get it done. And then that's good to hear that that can be moved side to side to get around it potentially. Next one, are staff aware of spiresgate.ca, which is the company advertising the development that's going in the southwest corner? And if you look on their website, they have an architecture tab of what they expect it to look like. Does that comply with all of the recommendations in the guidelines?
If I may, if your worship, to Councillor Wolf, but the site in question is which one, sir? I didn't follow your description.
Spiresgate.ca.
Yeah,
the name of the development.
And which location in the area are they marketing? Is that the
southwest corner, off of Spires Road, the southwest corner of it.
If I could, I referred to Mr. Lee, who is handling some development applications in the area. I believe that is one of 2 applications that have been considered. Mr. Lee?
Your worship, it's Wayne. I'll tackle that one. In terms of the southwest corner, that development permit has already been issued by council. That design is for a neo-traditional peaked roof design. So that does have an active issued development permit.
Thank you, Mr.
My follow-up question then is, does it comply with what the guidelines are in this report today?
Through your worship, to Councillor Wolf, yes, it does.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. My follow-up, please, going to staff here for a third question. To the north of Spires Road, the northern Spires Road, to the north of it, in between Westminster Highway, there's a parallel. It's not a road. It's a driveway access to the back of the properties on that frontage on Westminster. I don't see it in any of the maps in either of the reports, so it doesn't show that is it going to remain? Is one question. And the main reason I'm asking is I went along it today, and it has a very large stand of trees that run not the full length of it, but definitely the western half of that, the back of the properties on Spires Gate that back onto this frontage. So my question is, will that road be retained, or I'm sorry, not road, route, whatever? And if so, if it's at the same grade, could the back of the properties also be kept as is in height so that the trees can be retained?
Through your worship to Councillor Wolf, those would be the two properties that front onto Westminster Highway, I believe you're referring to?
No, I'm talking about the Spires Gate properties that back onto that lane.
Oh, I see. Okay, yeah. Through your worship to Councillor Wolf, again, through the development application, we would be reviewing site grading and adjacency issues for the adjacent properties. Knowing that the tree preservation is an important aspect of the community, we would work with the developer on any site to achieve the best retention we could, including grading issues if possible. That would be subject to a specific application that we could in fact look at the time.
Great. Through your worship, to follow up on that one, will that laneway remain open end on both sides, and is it likely to keep the same height, or is that going to become a high road and be brought way up and impact the land to the south? Do you know that yet, or no?
At this point, through your worship, Councillor, we haven't considered that specific detail of the land use planning at this time, but thank you for making us aware of it, and we'll make sure we deal with it.
Okay, thank you. Just two more. In report for item number 5, it talks about the private outdoor space. So per unit, per townhouse unit, currently it's 37 meters squared. Is that right?
Through your worship, that is correct, yes.
Yeah. And if this is approved, the staff recommendation, that would be slashed to 30 meters squared per unit. And that decision is coming in today's report, correct?
That is correct to the chair, to Councillor Wolf. We're looking for council endorsement to look at that type of reduction in private open space in this area. Again, with the passage of time since the plan was first drafted in 2008 and adopted in 2009, the availability of park space in the area has increased through other acquisitions and other works. So that, in tandem with trying to look to achieve the type of streetscape and intimate pedestrian realm, we see a benefit to reducing the private on space to 30 meters.
Okay, thank you. Just to comment on there, I'm not sure if someone else is going to make a referral later. If not, I would like to make one later for the broader land use investigation by staff. And if that doesn't go ahead, I'm going to oppose this, because seeing the amount of trees that are there and the amount of permeable surfaces that will be lost, and then all the developments will get there, they'll find their ways to comply with the bylaw and the area plan and put in other green spaces and such. If we're not going up in height in other places to allow more green space to remain, then I think we should keep our number as it is, 37 meters squared, as the minimum private outdoor space. And so that's why I would be opposing it today if there's no referral that goes ahead. And then finally, my last point, really quick. I am also opposed to the 4 properties being no longer park use. I think we're very fortunate that those properties were placed in 2009 as placeholder properties for park space. I see the benefit in those remaining for. I've experienced taking my father-in-law who's in a wheelchair and my mother-in-law who's in a wheelchair, and we wouldn't make it as far as Garden City Lands or even Garden City Park. Outside their building, you go to the closest place where there's trees, where there's views of nature, and I think it needs to be essential that it's in that area, not having to cross the street for people who have challenges with their abilities. So I wholeheartedly support having those placeholder properties permanent park features. It's actually one tree loaded with apples today, very healthy tree. There's also a tall grove of conifers. An item a few minutes ago, we were discussing about telling a property holder to keep trees. Well, there's a stand of conifers even better than that. That would be protected if these properties remain as park. So again, if there's no referral, I'll be opposing both these items for those reasons. Thank you.
Councillor Al.
Yes, Your Worship, I have 2 questions. I want to start to help me to understand what is the difference between a park and a greenway. Because to me, they're very different. And you cannot just replace a park with a greenway for the purpose and the objective and the design. So in staff's mind, what's the difference between the two?
Mr. Korniski, I believe, will be able to answer that question, Your Worship.
Through Your Worship to Councillor Al, thank you for the question. As a park planner and landscape architect, I look as park as a larger contiguous space, usually, you know, as indicated on the plan, kind of square or larger, that would permit use in that space. For example, if it was much larger, we'd maybe have a small sports field or a sports field, a stand of trees. In a space as large as these 4 lots, we'd probably look at a small sitting area and a tot lot, a little playground, and a stand of trees. That said, with a greenway, so we have a very large example of a greenway with the railway greenway on the west side of the city. So we look at greenways as linear parks, and specifically for you know, transportation usually kind of pass through. Not to say that we would not have areas to pause, such as seating and water fountains and signage. But it's specifically in the Spires neighborhood area, as I said earlier, the greenways and the pedestrian linkages that would attach on either end of these green areas indicated on GP 149. They're there to serve the pragmatic purposes of providing emergency services access. So that, of course, we don't have fires on a regular basis, so they would be essentially linear park space. So the way we envisioned it is that these are opportunities for children or kids or even big kids like me, to do chalk art or play road hockey or learn how to ride a bike or ride a bike and in a safe area. So in summary, parks are for kind of more permanent uses and large, like what you see at, let's say, Cook or any community or neighborhood park, whereas a greenway is typically for transportation. But both have trees, both have grass, both have opportunities to sit and interact with nature or be active.
Yes, thank you. And that's why I think, you know, a greenway cannot replace a park because they're different. Now, the second question is on GP 123, staff mentioned that the purpose is or the recommendation is to change the destination of some space from park to general urban T4. So what is the included in the definition of general urban T4?
Through Your Worship, Councillor Al, this would put those properties in the same general land use pattern of a structured townhouse development, similar to other areas in the Spires neighborhood.
So they basically it's for residential use?
Through Your Worship, that is correct, residential use.
Thank you.
All right. Now, obviously, some people are wanting to refer stuff. So my suggestion is let's get both motions on the floor, and then we'll take them one by one, and we can entertain referral motions if that's what people want. So someone want to move?
So moved.
Moved. Is it seconded? Okay, so it's moved and seconded. Both of them are moved and seconded. Now, I think someone wants to, I think it was Councillor Green, you want to make an amendment, refer it for the purpose of talking about the walkways?
Yeah, referral or amendment. The very easternmost link to Garden City, I would like to see that continue to be in the corners, diagonal to the green space, the big parks, so that it's pleasant for pedestrians.
Okay, I want to clarify. Are you referring to page 128 where it's basically they're diagonal?
Yeah, so on, you can see the diagonals on 128. And then if you, oh, sorry?
No, go ahead.
Okay, so if you look at the diagonals on 128 and then compare that to 135, 135, the very easternmost section, the single lot depth, if that could be placed in the corners so that pedestrians can exit out to the intent pedestrian and cyclist crossing that's on the map.
Barry, if we want to make that kind of a change, we'd have to refer it back for you to consider just how to put that in, wouldn't we?
Through your worship, you could refer it, or we could take direction so that we maintain, if not diagonal, if I may, through to Councillor Green, diagonal does pose challenges for site access.
That's not what I asked. I asked whether we needed to amend it or refer it.
Would need to be referred back, sir.
Okay. So, Councillor Green, your motion is to refer it back?
Yeah, refer it back for linkages in the northeast and southeast corners.
The northeast and the southeast corners. Okay. Okay. Is that seconded?
Second.
All right. So that's moved and seconded. Now we're going to have some amendments on this referral. I want to see what people are thinking all the way down. So, in terms of making a referral for those two corners, Councillor Liu.
I would support that, and I would support adding more to that referral.
Well, we're getting there. That's what I said.
Yes.
We're going to have more amendments. Councillor Wolf, on the referral.
Yeah, I support that referral, yeah.
Okay. Councillor Day, on the referral.
Yeah, on the referral, I support it. I also want further amendments, and I just want to say that
we don't want to hear about them.
the video is freezing. I
We're
can't
just
see.
on that one.
My
Councillor
video
McPhail.
is freezing. I'll have to have it read back.
Councillor McPhail.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just had a question. Does that preclude then any linear linkages? If this referral, is it only going to look at the corners, or it could be a combination of?
You mean the existing linkages? Or the proposed linkages?
Right.
Yeah,
is it either or could it be a combination of both?
Why don't we make it more general? Councillor Green, why don't we make it, look at the pedestrian linkages, including the northeast and the southeast corners? Okay? So that's the amendment. Or, sorry, that's the referral. Now, I've heard someone else wanted to talk about further, so we'll amend the referral. Who wants to talk to that? Councillor Liu.
Thanks. On the additional referral?
Yes?
Okay, so I'd like to refer to staff, see if there's another roof option that allows for the outdoor space reaching 37 meters squared and still fits the concept look and feel that we're trying to accomplish in this neighborhood.
Is that seconded?
Second.
I've got a question of staff on that. Isn't what set off a lot of this discussion an application that came through that council expressed dismay over a flat roof? Isn't that where we started from?
Through your worship, that is correct.
So, okay.
But that doesn't mean that there's not something else out there, right? Like there's other.
We can take a look at it.
More than one design style.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay, so just a minute. So we are on this amendment to look at roof options. Who wants to talk to that? I'm going to call the question to amend for that reason. All those in favor? Those opposed? All right. So that's part of it now. So it's on the pedestrian linkages, the roof option, and there was something else. Councillor Liu, was there anything more? Okay. Your hand's still up. Councillor Day, did you have something more?
Right. Yes. I think that looking at only stacked townhouses is too limiting, that if we allow areas to build a little taller and then allow more green space, we can probably create more outdoor space.
So it's, you want to look at density and the provision of green space? Yes?
Yes.
Okay. Speaking to that, who wants to speak to that?
Can I ask,
Go ahead. Councillor Liu.
may I ask a question of staff about that? Does that require a bigger OCP amendment because it's changing a whole, like it's a much bigger change than just what we're talking about
A
right here. Is that
pedestrian
true?
walkway, yes.
Yeah, through your worship to Councillor Liu, yes, that is a bigger referral. That will entail more analysis as well as a potentially larger public consultation package to go forward to look at a broader range of issues in terms of the overall land use plan for the area.
All right, but you can at least outline the options for us.
Absolutely.
Councillor McPhail, on this amendment to add questions of density and provision of green space.
Yes, I have a question through you to staff. So staff mentioned earlier a project that's already been approved that meets basically the criteria we're looking at today. So how many projects in that area have been approved? Because I don't know if we want to have a hodgepodge now of different types of housing. And we've already heard from staff that with the acquisition of the Garden City land, there is a surplus of park space.
Through your worship, Mr. Craig, I believe, has a response on that question.
Through your worship to Councillor McPhail, in terms of applications, there's one application to date that has approved rezoning and development permit. There's a second application that triggered the referral, which is at third reading, and the development permit was recently endorsed by the development permit panel. There are 3 other applications for stacked townhouses which are currently under staff review.
So, given that you've said this is a much larger referral, what would happen to those projects? Would they be grandfathered, or how does that work? Now that they're in process?
Through your worship to Councillor McPhail, the application that's already through public hearing, that will proceed. The other applications, if it was council's desire to withhold those applications, we would need direction at this meeting. Without that direction, there is an existing OCP that is in place, and those applications will continue to be reviewed in accordance with the current OCP.
Thank you. I'm not going to support the referral on this one.
I want to ask Wayne or Joe about this question of density. Isn't density in the city center, isn't the whole premise of the city center area plan based on density and proximity to the Canada Line stations, and also the wish to not have a uniform maximum height to, as you go farther away from the Canada Line stations, the lower it goes? Is that right?
Yes, Your Worship. There are a couple of comments I'd like to make. One is that the city centre plan was designed for a maximum population capacity. So if you're going to fundamentally re-examine density in this area, and what Councillor Day is suggesting is pretty fundamental, you would need to revisit it in the context of the whole city centre area plan. And yes, the city centre plan is premised on putting the bulk of your population in proximity within a walking distance of the Canada Line stations, and then the height and density falls off generally as you move away from that. So that approach would suggest not increasing height or density in this area.
All right, so we're on this question of the amendment to add to the referral questions of density and the provision of green space, which would then go to the OCP. Councillor Steves, on that amendment?
Yeah, on that amendment, I'm very much in support of it. If you'll recall, going way back to 2008 or 9, the Canada Line was supposed to come to City Hall at Granville Avenue. And because of the lack of funds and they wanted to drill under Vancouver, we lost a whole section of the Canada Line. we planned before the Canada line went in, when we had the B line, that the B line would come to City Hall. So it seems to me we should maintain our original plan. We need to increase the density in this area. And if we do increase the density, then maybe we'll get the Canada line, when it's redeveloped, which isn't going to be very far off, that it'll come to Granville and number 3 is where it was supposed to be. If you look at the Canada line right now, when it's only single track, it's got to be rebuilt where it is. So they might as well do the final construction right down to Granville Avenue. So I'd certainly support densification. I think it's a great idea.
Far be it for me to run contradictions, Councillor Steves, but having been on the TransLink board when that went through, that Canada line was supposed to go one more block to Cook. It was never supposed to go to, we wanted it to come to City Hall. It was never going to come to City Hall.
No, we wanted it at City Hall, and the B line was coming to City Hall. Yes. That's the difference of opinion. The other thing I want to say is that Garden City Lands was never, in my opinion, acquired to be a park. It's supposed to be agricultural, and to say that this is a park for the whole area, I think is dead wrong.
Councillor Green.
I want to ask a question about this idea of the height falling off as you leave city center, because on the east side of Garden City Road, there's quite a few towers and mid-rises. So it's supposed to fall off and then go back up and then fall off again. I don't understand.
Through the chair to Councillor Green, that particular plan and those developments predate the latest version of the city centre area plan. So, in effect, the buildings in that vicinity are an anomaly.
I mean, for us to preclude increased densification because there's already towers on the other side of the road and we're supposed to fall off. It doesn't add up to me. But nonetheless, I think that we do need to look at density and provision of green space. But my question is also, aren't we doing that soon with our OCP? Like, we're doing the big OCP revision. Is it next year?
Through the worship to Councillor Green, there is no direction at this time to do an overall OCP update. We are looking at some amendments to our housing policies as well as the industrial land intensification that may result in some changes to the plan. But there is no deadline or no timeline established at this time for an overall OCP review.
Okay, then I'm in favor of having this. I thought that there was something coming up. So in light of the fact that there's not, I think we should take a look at it.
Councillor McNulty. Councillor Green, Councillor Steves, your hands are still up.
Just quickly, Your Worship, if this passes, does that mean the 6 applications that are on record are going to be stopped? I think that's highly unfair. People were planning on developing according to what rules, and we changed the rules in midstream. They will continue, I hope.
That's
under
up
the
to
old
this
plan.
meeting, isn't it?
Well, I would move that they be allowed to continue.
Well,
while we're looking at this, this is a major examination. It's not going to be done in a week.
You can make that motion, but not now while this other motion's on the floor.
Well, I'd like to do that after this.
Then. All right. So on the question as to whether we should look at the OCP in terms of density and the provision of green space, adding that to the referral is what I'm saying. All those in favor?
I'll support that.
Just a minute. I want to see your hands. Okay. So I see Councillor McNulty, Steves, Wolf, Green, Day, Howe in favor. Those opposed, Councillor Liu, Councillor McPhail, and the Mayor opposed. So that is carried. I suggest we get through this referral. I'll come back to you, Bill, on that question you had. Okay. All right, that's it for the referral. I'm going to call the question on the overall referral with the 3 changes that were agreed on or passed. All those in favor? Anyone opposed? Anyone opposed? I don't see. Okay, so that is carried. Now, Bill, your motion related to whether
I would move that staff be directed to continue processing the existing applications that are on the table.
Second.
Okay. And so that's moved in second. So I want to be very clear.
That will be under the old rules, if you wish, if we make some changes.
Yes, under the old rules. Now, staff, if we don't make that motion, do you continue processing or does things stop with that motion of referral?
Your Worship, we will continue processing. I mean, certainly you can pass a resolution, but the processing of existing applications would continue. That's our practice.
So in other words, we don't need that
Okay.
resolution, right? So we don't need, Joe, we don't need that resolution. What we need is if someone wants to stop it, we need that resolution, right, Joe?
That's correct, Your Worship. Yes.
All right, so I'll take it that motion has been withdrawn. Does anyone want to make a motion that we stop processing applications in the Spires Road area pending the return of the referral and the consideration of resolutions 5 and 6? Anyone?
Yes, I'll make that motion as you stated.
Okay. All right. So stop. So that's moved. Is it seconded? It is not. So that's the end of that. So I take it that in terms of the referral, just to go back, just make sure we're all talking the same thing. We move 5 and 6 at the same time, and they're both referred back, looking at the walkways, looking at the roof options, looking at the density questions. Okay? We're all clear? Everybody's in agreement on that. Linda? Did you have a question?
Thank you, Mr. Yeah, I just had a question about the official community plan. So our last official community plan was adopted in 2012. I thought we had to have a new one in 2022. We've had discussions about starting the official community plan review. Now, I thought that we were going to be doing that next year, and it was just stated there was no direction. Do we have to give direction to do that?
Joe or Barry?
Your Worship, staff is currently scoping what a review of the official community plan could look like. So I would expect that we would bring you something early in the new year. Our thoughts at this point are that rather than sort of start a complete review from zero, that perhaps we could focus on issues of affordability, sustainability, that type of thing. So it would be a fairly significant review, but it wouldn't be starting from the beginning.
Thank you.
All right. Okay, I think that does us on the open agenda, unless anybody's telling me something else.
Yes, yes, Your Worship, I just want to let clerk know that I want to have a recorded opposition to number 6. So I thought when we did the vote there, that was just for number 5 with the changes, but I want to show that I'm opposed to taking those 4 placeholder properties out from potential park. Thanks.
I'm very sorry, but we've referred that back. So there is no place to record opposition other than your general remarks.
Okay, great. Thank you.
So some move adjournment. Okay, we're now